and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, China and Russia are holding joint naval exercises in the South China Sea. What security concerns does Moscow share with Beijing? And how will the exercises affect Russia's influence in Southeast Asia? And Muslim pilgrims are gathering in Mecca for this year's Hajj, in spite of last year's deadly stampede. Many of the city's ancient neighborhoods have been replaced by luxury hotels. Riyadh is eager to expand its religious tourism industry, but is the country moving too fast? Hello and welcome to World Insight on CCTV News. We begin today's show in the South China Sea, where China and Russia are holding a joint naval exercise. China and Russia enjoy strong bilateral ties, and the Joint Sea 2016 drill aims to increase the two countries' defense capabilities. Our panel will discuss the strategic partners' common security concerns. But first, this story.
Vessels, helicopters, and aircrafts. Chinese and Russian troops are joining together to hold the Joint Sea 2016 Navy drill. This year's drill will be comprised of defense, rescue, and anti-submarine operations, as well as island seizing activities. 10 ships from the Chinese Navy, some of them from the Nanhai Fleet, along with 11 aircraft and 8 helicopters, are taking part in the week-long exercise.
Compared with previous drills, this drill has improved on organization, command issuance, deployment, and other areas. It will also highlight digitalized and standardized use of forces in combat.
Russia has sent 3 surface ships, 2 helicopters, 96 Marines, as well as amphibious armored vehicles to the South China Sea to take part in the drill.
During this drill, we can exchange knowledge about a variety of tactics so that we can enhance understanding between our military departments and also promote future cooperation.
The Joint Sea 2016 exercise is the largest joint naval drill that China has ever held with Russia. This is the 5th time that China and Russia have held a joint drill since 2012, when the two nations held joint Navy exercises in the Yellow Sea. China deployed its largest Navy fleet during the joint drill in 2013. China and Russia deepened naval cooperation in 2014 when they mixed their ships for the first time. Last year, the drill was conducted in 2 phases. They first conducted an open sea navigation safety drill, and then their first combined landing operation exercise. In the past 3 years, Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with Russian President Vladimir Putin more than he has with any other head of state. The two leaders have maintained close contact through annual regular summits and a joint celebration marking the 70th anniversary of the victory of World War II. They also met in private during the G20 summit in Hangzhou earlier this month. Experts expect China and Russia to strengthen communication and coordination on major international issues during the 12th round of bilateral strategic and security consultations currently underway in Beijing.
And for more discussion about China-Russia military cooperation, we are joined here in the Beijing studio. Mr. Yang Xiyu, Senior Research Fellow from the China Institute of International Studies, and also Professor Wang Yiwei, Director of the Renmin University Institute of International Affairs. Meanwhile, we're also joined from Moscow in Russia, Pavel Felgenhauer, prominent author and expert on Russian military and foreign affairs. Welcome to the 3 of you, gentlemen. First of all, let's take a look at the content of this joint exercise. Mr. Yang, there have been several descriptions coming from the Chinese side. Let me just read through some of those. Live fire drills, island defense, and also landing operations. According to some media reports, international one particularly, it's called island seizing operations. What is China having in mind doing that kind of joint military drills with Russia in the South China Sea?
Well, I think this joint drills does not target at any potential flashing points like South China Sea or EC, not about such a potential conflict points. However, these drills really reflects the deepened military cooperation. The two military forces or two navies has got a very deep operation both at technical and strategy. So some of this program of this joint drills reflects, compared with the previous drills, this drill showed more substantive nature than before.
Okay, if the substantive is the adjective you would like to use, may I go to Mr. Felgenhauer before I come to Professor Wang here in Beijing? Mr. Felgenhauer, behind the content of the drills, are there any strategic goals between these two countries when it comes to military cooperation? And what are the two countries looking at, aiming at, by doing all of these?
Well, this is an exercise that was going to give experience to the commanding officers on how they can work together, and the men how they can work together if somewhere in the future Russian and Chinese political leaders decide that there is some kind of room for some kind of joint military action, maybe anti-terrorist or peacekeeping. And of course the soldiers and the Navy should be ready and have joint manuals to do that, and that's of course the main thing. It also of course has political repercussions. As far as I know, China has been for some time offering Russia to hold such military exercises down south in the South China Sea. Russia was politely previously declining, but now agreed, and so the Russian naval force appears there in the South China Sea, where Soviet naval power was present in the 70s, in the 90s, based in Cam Ranh Bay in Vietnam, but that was not with China, that was more against China, but now we are with China. This is a demonstration of Russia and China moving closer to being somewhat allies, not just partners.
Oh, somewhat allies. That's a big word. Mr. Wang, Professor Wang here in Beijing, what do you make of it?
Well,
You shrug your shoulder, what does that mean?
we say Chinese foreign policy is independent, non-alliance policy, but definitely our relations with Russia is very typical, strategic, comprehensive partnership, coordinated. Not only in political strategy but also militarily. This is, I think, to show that China and Russia, both the permanent member of the United Nations, has a great responsibility to peacekeeping, not only in the Eastern China Sea and other things, but also in the South China Sea.
Mr. Yang, what do you think? I mean, knowing very well, I'm sure, the two countries, that others would give different kinds of interpretations to what exactly the two countries are doing now with its naval exercises. Why do they want to do that still?
Well, obviously, no capital between two countries have a plan to forge the bilateral relation as a military alliance. However, they really want, both capital really want to forge the two military forces as a military partner. Partnership is the nature of the two military forces.
What are going to be the nature of this partnership? What would this partnership between China and Russia, when it comes to military, mean for the other players in the region, even beyond the Pacific?
Well, first of all, Russia always regard themselves as a Pacific power, and China, of course, is a Pacific power. The two powers want to make a cooperation to enhance the peace and the stability by all means, including military means, if necessary. So the deeper the military joint drills, deeper and deeper from the years, reflects the cooperation between the two countries is deepened and enhanced, including the military. So in other words, the two countries' diplomatic efforts for the peace and stability will be based on many means, including military means.
Professor Wang here in Beijing, what do you make of Moscow's recent approaches on different directions? Of course, with China, there has been increasing cooperation over the past few years. Apparently, there's also a ever more eye-catching naval exercise going on. And meanwhile, Moscow has been working with Washington so-called for a ceasefire in Syria, which has been a big issue, as you may know, for the two countries. And also Russia has been approaching some of the other regional powers in the Asia-Pacific region. What do you make from China's perspective, Russia's different kinds of approaches all at the same time, including Russia's relationship with Turkey and some of the other key nations, whether it is in the Asia-Pacific region or even beyond?
Well, Russia is the biggest country in the world. It's a Eurasian, there's so many neighbors, either in the Mediterranean Seas, in the Indian Ocean, South China Sea, Pacific. They have the interests. They also felt the threat and many challenges everywhere. So they need to do this. We understand that as a big power and the traditional great power. Russia also enhanced the cooperation with China because no single country, even as big as you cannot meet the challenges to deal with your many threats by yourself, and even United States. But something different between China-Russia cooperation is United States just bilateral alliance. The United States take the leading role, and others just follow. So China and Russia partnership, I think, is more equal, and that's different kinds of relations with the U.S., Japan's military regime.
Mr. Felgenhauer, let's just be frank here. I mean, China and Russia have been working together over the past few years very closely, but at the same time, the two have known each other through decades, and there have been ups and downs of that relationship. And it seems that each other knows the other side's nature very well, and that also has led to the conclusion that we all have there's not likely to be any so-called ally relationship. Having said that, though, Mr. Felgenhauer, what do you make of Russia's multiple approaches these days, particularly militarily, with China, with other powers in the Middle East, and also now apparently trying to repair its fences with the United States?
Well, Russia sees the United States kind of globally as not really a partner, it's more of an enemy, sort of. Though that doesn't mean that we are preparing for immediate kind of conflict on different kind of regions. There are serious efforts to find kind of working relationship with the United States in the Middle East to stop the war in Syria, maybe also to some extent in the crisis in Ukraine, though NATO expansion is seen as a very serious threat, missile defense is seen as a serious threat, and in the Pacific region also Russia sees the problems with the United States and is building a defense kind of Pacific rim from Chukotka to Vladivostok, with the center in the Kuril Islands and the Sea of Okhotsk. So that's kind of, and so in these different areas, Russian and Chinese, also of course in Central Asia, stability in Central Asia, Russian and Chinese interests coincide, which is bringing, of course, the two big nations together. It's a very developing partnership, and possibly in the future there could be actually joint action, though that's for the time being just possibility of the future, since the Russian and Chinese interests are also somewhat compartmentalized to different parts of the Pacific, and so there's a coinciding of interest, and at the same time there are still kind of some differences between the two nations. So it's not an alliance, of course, but it's moving a bit closer, slowly but closer, to a possibility of elements of an alliance.
Interesting. Mr. Yang, two key words coming from Mr. Felgenhauer. One is compartmentalized kinds of shared interest. On the other hand, moving closer to allied kind of relationship. Help us to understand your interpretations of Mr. Felgenhauer's words.
Now we can develop a varied description of China-Russia relationship. However, the common words or the key words I believe it's a partner, partly because of the common interests driving the two countries getting closer and closer in all areas, and also partly because of the strategic pressures from the United States. Just look at the current situation. Both China and Russia are facing very serious challenges from in security area from the United States. For example, the anti-missile systems. U.S. is trying to build up anti-missile system both at Atlantic front and Pacific front. So such efforts really make a damage for the global strategic stability that will threat China and Russia's national security.
But the question is, Mr. Yang, will necessarily the U.S. be the bridge builder, in a way, for China and Russia?
Well, U.S. it seems to me is a sort of broker, a bridge, but in negative way to drive U.S. and China and Russia closer. So besides the common interest driving force, but also because of the negative part, U.S. pressure push China and Russia closer.
Pushing the two countries closely, but it would only be testified whether the relationship is close or not by realities. So let's take a look at some of the issues that are facing China and Russia directly at this moment. The Korean Peninsula, peace and stability. Being two members of the six-party talks, China and Russia, will they be able to do something together? Secondly, with the terrorism that is still be a threat for the region, can the two countries be able to really achieve something together? Not just naval exercises, but really something that is concrete. Professor Wang, what do you think?
Well, I think China-Russia's military partnership, cooperation, is not just a response to so-called U.S. pivot back to Asia or unilateralism. I think the two permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, they work together to provide security public goods for the world. It's their responsibility. It's not just rely on the United States or its airlines to do this. So, both China and Russia, not just work bilaterally, but also they are seeking the opportunities to work together with United States even, in Iranian nuclear issues, in North Korea nuclear issues, but in different ways, in different levels. In Korean Peninsula, I think China and Russia work together to guarantee that the United States cannot use force to overthrow North Korea regime. This, they declared many times that North Korea felt this threat. Without their support, backup, I think maybe something happened before, like what happened in Iraq, in Libya. But now it may be difficult because North Korea has nuclear weapons. For the anti-terror, China and Russia are two founding members of the SCO, anti-three evils. This is major jobs of the SCO. Without SCO, the only military from the maritime, the Americans, bilateral airlines is unstable. So both continental and the maritime, we need more international organizations. But now, based on the SCO, we are thinking maybe there's a new framework of the Asia Pacific combined with the Euro-Asian. But China and Russia proposed this for many years. But so far, unfortunately, the United States, for other considerations, and also positive response.
I see. Mr. Yang, what do you think about the earlier realities that China and Russia, if they want to be together, needs to face? And also the fact that the strategic choice that China sometimes needs to make as to who to work with, on what occasion, about what?
I think that will be very sophisticated relationship between the two big powers. On one hand, as I mentioned, they are getting closer and closer, both strategically and technically. But on the other hand, both Russia and China will strongly insist on their respective independence. Both of the powers are independent powers. That's the basic reason why the two great countries will never get the so-called alliance. Because in the current international relations, there's no equal footing alliance. So whenever, for example, whenever Japan and the US say we are partner, but I would say unequal partner. So only now it's very unique. Only China and Russia partnership is based on equal footing. Partly because the so-called independent diplomacy, because besides the closer and closer ties with each other, both China and Russia also engage with the many other powers, including engage with United States independently.
I see. Mr. Falkenhauer, you've been listening to the other two panelists. What do you make eventually of what you consider as appropriate strategic choices for Moscow?
I believe that this is going to be a very important step, this what's happening right now in the South China Sea, because it's a real important step for Russia and China. It's bringing the two countries much closer together in a very important time, and that is, of course, and it will have, though it won't have long-term in itself strategic repercussions, this exercise. It's a one-time kind of event. It's not that Russia is moving militarily into having a permanent presence in the South China Sea. But this is an important step in further and much more closer cooperation, military cooperation between China and Russia. So this is, of course, a very important event happening right now.
That could be a signature gestures coming from both sides in terms of how they want to see the relationship go, particularly when it comes to military cooperation. Thank you so much, the three of you gentlemen, for being with us. Pavel Falkenhauer from Moscow, in Beijing, Wang Yiwei, and Yang Xiyu. Really appreciate, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay with us here on World Insight. Coming up in our final segment, Muslim pilgrims are gathering in Mecca for this year's Hajj. In spite of last year's deadly stampede, many of the city's ancient neighborhoods have been replaced by luxury hotels. Riyadh is eager to expand its religious tourism industry. Is the country moving too fast? Where is it going? You're watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Welcome back. Muslims from around the world are in Saudi Arabia for this year's Hajj, an annual pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. The Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and is considered to be the largest religious gathering in the world. Pilgrims began the 5-day ritual last Saturday with a visit to Mount Arafat and a ritual stoning ceremony in Mina. Thousands of people were crushed when a stampede broke out last year. Saudi Arabia says this time that it has increased security and also introduced a new technology, as it said, to make sure that this year's event will be more safe. Let's take a look.
The Great Hajj has begun. Pilgrims have started coming to Mount Arafat overnight, their first stop in this 5-day ritual. To most of them, it's been a pleasant trip so far.
I feel I am the happiest man in the world because I am here on this mountain of mercy among my friends and all these other pilgrims. We wanted to come here in the morning, but I was too excited. I couldn't wait.
One of the main crises that arose after last year's stampede was identification of victims. This year, the kingdom is more prepared. It obliged all pilgrims to wear this quick response coded bracelet, which contains all the information necessary about each pilgrim once the code gets scanned. But we didn't see the GPS bracelets earlier reported to detect accumulating clusters of people.
After I understood the complete picture of what it can do, that by scanning the code they can know my name, where I stay and all my full information, I realized that it's wonderful that we've reached that level of improvement.
Saudi Arabia's government says it could revoke the Hajj license next year from companies who fail to make their pilgrims wear the bracelet.
The preparations this year are wonderful. As a country and government and workers in this process, we always look for the best ways to serve the pilgrims, not just by the new electronic bracelet, but in all other aspects. This country was established by serving Muslims here and across the world.
The flickering lights of police cars and ambulances are continuously roaming the entire Arafat vicinity. In addition to local supervision, each chief of delegation spent the night supervising his country's pilgrims.
Most of the Egyptian delegation has arrived to Arafat. Things are going smoothly, thank God. We came to inspect the camp yesterday. We are confident that things will go smoothly. Many lessons were learned from what happened last year. I've met the Saudi Hajj minister and made sure that plans are put in place to guarantee that no accidents shall be repeated this year and the next ones.
There is no doubt that managing millions of pilgrims from 150 different countries is a very difficult task. Last year may have been a tragic Hajj to the world, but the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is exerting immense efforts this year to show the world that it can do much better. Adil Mahroui, CCTV, from Mount Arafat in Mecca, Saudi Arabia.
For more on this year's Hajj, we are now joined in our Beijing studio, Mr. Li Guofu, Senior Research Fellow and also Director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. Also in Hong Kong, we are joined by Mr. Mohammed Al-Sudairi. He is a research affiliate at the King Faisal Center. Welcome as well. Mr. Al-Sudairi, are you confident that this year's Hajj will be much safer compared to 2015, which has been quite a tragic?
Well, I believe that the new measures that the Saudi government has unveiled, as well as the various different policies it has implemented, do increase one's confidence that safety will be much better this year. I mean, aside from, for example, the bracelets that your clip just highlighted, there has been a considerable retraining of medical and security staff. There has been greater cooperation and coordination with countries with regards to their pilgrims and with regards to the arrival and departure dates. There has also been an expansion of the CCTV network. So a lot of different things have been undertaken to ensure that the Hajj would run as smoothly as possible. And I think it has, for the most part.
Mr. Li, of course, this is not just about the safety of the people in the Hajj. It is also about the governing capabilities of Saudi Arabia government. It is also about Saudi Arabia's own credibility among the Muslim world. What do you think? Are you confident this time?
Of course. And we know that last year is a disaster. And
a few thousand lives.
Yes, there's a lot of complaints about the management. And Saudi this time, it is very serious, as we have heard so far. The programs, they are all satisfied with, the proper arrangements this year. And as I have read a piece of news that even the king and Simon himself was live in the Mina, and the right places last year where it was crushed,
right.
Many people have died. Now he himself at this time, he'll be there. He personally at the see to everything according to the arrangements.
Mr. Al-Sudairi, as Mr. Li just said, the king himself trying to put his own personal credibility down there on the safety of the Hajj this time. What do you make of the king's, so far, his credibility in his country and also in the Muslim world? After all, we see a new generation.
This is a very loaded question, I have to say.
It is a loaded question, and therefore I want your expertise on that. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think the country faces a gamut of different crises in terms of, the sustainability of its political economy. There's many different regional crises surrounding the country. And I think, generally speaking, the public as a whole is willing to put faith, at least in the new administration that has emerged within the country since the beginning of 2015. Now, in the wider Muslim world, however, I think that perceptions about Saudi Arabia, discourses about Saudi Arabia have changed, and this only has increased the challenges that the country faces as a whole.
Mr. Li, it is no secret that Saudi Arabia is in a period of transformation, not only within its own country, but also in terms of its relations, let's just say, with the United States and also with the rest of the Muslim world. How much of a crystallization do you think that the management of the Hajj and also the communications it has with all the peoples coming from more than 100 different countries into the Hajj, in a way could reflect that kind of mentality of change and the capabilities of change?
I think we can see that, as more and more people every year would go to, for this program, and this is one of the pillars of the Muslims. And, the arrangement we see has been improved year by year, using the modern, the facilities in order to guarantee the securities. The security, I think, would be in both aspects. One is to prevent any terrorists. Don't forget, there are the ISO, some other terrorists. They would much use to this kind of occasion to damage the credibilities, and so also the normal life of the Saudis, also the Muslims. The other is to prevent it once again this kind of stampede, sort of the incidents. So I think, as you correctly say, that Saudi has entered into a period of transition. The older generations were handed the power as well as the experience to the younger generations. I think, to manage this kind of Hajj, it is a traditional way of Saudis, because from the very beginning, the Saudis, they have been doing this quite well. I believe with each of the lessons they have learned, they would be improved much better for next.
Saudi Arabia is a country that has been enjoying quite much of its development based on oil money, and that is continued to be the case. But Mr. Al-Sadari, the new generation, given the fact there have been so many different kinds of alternatives when it comes to energy in our world today, given the fact there has been geopolitical changes in our world today as well concerning Saudi Arabia, and given the fact that Saudi Arabia has to think about its own future, has been thinking about new ways to develop its economy. By the way, religious tourism is one of them, one of those ideas. How much do you think, Mr. Al-Sadari, that idea can prosper?
Well, I think with regards to religious tourism specifically, I mean, the plans that have been unveiled are quite ambitious. The country intends to increase investments in the tourism sector from around 8 billion to 46 billion by 2020. And the idea, of course, is that much of the focus will be on creating infrastructure, building Islamic museums, renovating Islamic heritage sites. But honestly, I have a few reservations about the realization of such plans, or at least the viability of the religious tourism sector. And this has a lot to do with the fact that, for instance, because of the particular history of Saudi Arabia and whatnot, a lot of the religious heritage sites had been destroyed. Of course, there has been an effort to renovate a lot of these sites in the past few decades, but it has come very much as something, it's a bit too late for that. Also, additionally, there is also a question of Saudi soft power. In many ways, Saudi Arabia suffers from an image problem within many parts of the Islamic world, which undermines, I think, its capacity to attract people on a religious basis if they're going to particular sites beyond Mecca and Medina. Actually, even within the holy cities themselves, sites which pilgrims from other sects would like to go to are impeded from doing so, given the reigning ideological milieu in Saudi Arabia. And there's also, more practical issues. For example, Saudi Arabia has not yet unveiled a practical visa regime. So all I'm saying is that the plans themselves are excellent and good, but there are very real limitations to how they could be realized.
Okay, well, that's of course the points from you. We'll let you adjust the earpiece. At the same time, let me ask you, Mr. Lee, around 50% of Saudi Arabia's GDP recently comes from its carbon fuel industry, namely that is the oil. So tourism makes up only at this point 2.7% of Saudi GDP, and half of that can be attributed to the Hajj and also the other kinds of pilgrimages. Saudi officials have plans to expand the Grand Mosque in Mecca so that it can hold 2.2 million worshippers by the year 2020, up from the current 600,000 currently. Many analysts believe tourism represents Saudi Arabia's second most important economic sector. But of course, that is only the plan. Do you agree with what Mr. Al-Sadari just said about the realities vis-a-vis the plan?
I think our Saudi friends has made it very clearly, and definitely because with the sharp down of the oil prices, the Saudi is facing some economic financial problems, and they have very huge deficits, and with the kind
the oil money keep on to be low because the barrel of oil is sold on the international market, more competitors.
So and the Deputy Crown Prince has come out with the vision of 2030, and within this grand the vision, and he said that the Saudi is prepared to transfer from depends on the oil to other industries, especially the non-oil sectors, and this is what he is doing, and to try to create more favorable the conditions for the foreign investments, and in order to create more jobs, and this is part of the reasons we can see that the Saudi is so active supported China's One Road, One Belt, and the Saudi, as
they also want to get on the train.
Yes, the Deputy Crown Prince has made it very clearly. They want to collect their the grand the vision of 2030 with China this the initiative One Belt, One Road.
Okay, that is about, of course, the infrastructure building. They want to put the oil money elsewhere in the world so that it can prosper in the future. But Mr. Al-Sadari, it is not just the One Belt, One Road, the infrastructure that Saudis want to develop, but also the tourism industry, even though you could be skeptical about it. And there's also the financial centers. A lot of them have been talking about a huge amount of cash that really have been pumped into this. What about all of these options? Will they really help Saudi to find a future?
Well, I mean, what the state is hoping to accomplish through the 2030 Vision Plan is to basically change the underpinnings of our political economy. So the hope is to rationalize our government, lift the subsidies, privatize many public sectors, for example, the IPO with regards to Aramco, transform Saudi Arabia into a logistical center, emphasize, a knowledge-based economy and so forth. But for me personally, I have a lot of reservations about sort of the neoliberal trajectory of this plan, in the sense that maybe it's not particularly suitable for the challenges that we're going to be facing in the next 10, 20 years. But at the end of the day, I'm not an economist, and I should also add that as a Saudi citizen, I would hope that this plan would succeed. But again, there are a lot of unknown variables and ambiguities about it that raise really a lot of questions about whether it would succeed or not.
And of course, it has a lot to do, Mr. Lee, with Saudi Arabia's own capability of nurturing its own talent, not just employing foreign talent, but have a sustainable source of talent for its own future. These are all challenges facing the Saudi administration at the moment. But when we are talking about today's topic, which is Hajj, it's also in a way, as both of you said, demonstrating the soft power and reflecting the level of soft power and the trust others have about Saudi Arabia. So how important, now let's come back to eventually this topic again, that Saudi Arabia is going to make sure this year's Hajj will be a successful one and will be a safe one.
I think a lot of measures has been taken, and they have learned, and for example, they will consult each of the head of the delegations, let each of individual the country to take as kind of responsible to properly arrange for its own programs. I think this is the one way. The other way is they have a sort of a training center has been set to train more effective the management, and also they have using a lot of electronic even the drones and the videos.
Yes,
they have been to watch it. They have tried to identify each of them, and also another very important measures they have been taking is dramatically reduced the number of the people this year. And the last year, we know that some people said maybe 2.5 million of people. That will be too much, too crowded for this size. But this year, they said less than 2 million.
I see, but that is a forever, in a way, dilemma, Mr. Al-Sudari, because Muslims around the world want to really visit Mecca at this period of time. But on the other hand, its capabilities of handling all of these people, of course, is limited. What do you make of this dilemma before we go?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a dilemma as such. I mean, the very large number of people that are coming there already is quite astounding, given the capacities of the country. That's and also given the geography of Mecca itself, which is quite mountainous and very difficult to access. And I think, we've sort of reached in many ways the natural limits of the number of people that actually that area can manage and receive, whether with regards to infrastructure, with the crowd management mechanisms and policies that the Saudi government uses and whatnot.
All right. Well, it's going to be a big test every year. And we'll see how this year's test is likely conclude. Thank you so much, Mohammed Al-Sudari, joining us from Hong Kong, and Li Guofu here in Beijing. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. We hope it is going to be a safe Hajj. Thank you. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of a program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You'll be able to find us, or you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.